All right, here we are, we're back. And it wouldn't be a nutrition video if we didn't talk about food for a little bit. So I'm gonna try to keep this quick. But basically what I wanna talk to you about are the macronutrients that basically every food fits within one of these categories, or sometimes multiple categories, but for the most part, there's one primary category for each food that you eat. So we have carbohydrates, we have proteins, and we have fats. And carbohydrates break down to glucose, proteins break down into amino acids, and fats break down into lipids that your body uses differently, and they break them down differently. You need all three. And the goal is that you get really good ones of all three. There really is a difference between good and bad carbs, proteins, and fats, okay? And we'll talk a little bit more about that at a later time, because food is very personal. Good and bad is really relative. In a lot of ways, it depends on, how well your body functions. So to some people, it might be just fine and really good for them to eat a certain vegetable or even potatoes. And for other people, it doesn't work that well because of something that might be wrong. So it's a very personal thing to determine what's good and bad. But first things first, I want you to start to think about what you're eating. So is the food, do you typically eat carbs, protein, or fats? Do you have a balance? What is it? Ultimately, each meal you want to have a balance of these things. And then throughout the end of the day, typically we have more carbs throughout the day and need more carbs than the other two. And you see these percentages that I have here. This is kind of when I'm tracking and just trying to maintain weight or whatever it is, because of my activity level and just because of how I feel. I typically feel best when I'm around 40% carbs, 30% protein. And I need that much protein because of the type of training that I do and the weight training that I do. So I need to continue to grow and recover my muscles through protein. So you don't necessarily have to have that high, but this is just a general idea. And 30% fats. And for me, again, it's because my carbs are a little bit lower, I can increase my fat content, but again, it needs to be really good fats. So I struggle with that balance sometimes. I don't always balance out that way, but if I'm tracking, that's typically what I want to do to maintain. And there's multiple variations of this out there, okay? And if you're trying to lose weight, you might have a different makeup. If you're trying to gain weight and hopefully gain lean muscle mass or something, then you would also have a different makeup. So you only really need to know that if you're going to track it and you have a certain goal that would allow you to try to fit within one of those categories. But that means logging all of your food and really trying to make sure you're fitting within that category, again, to meet more of a goal around weight loss or body mass and body fat percentages and things like that. A lot of people use this and it works very effectively. By the way, if you are trying to lose weight or anything, counting your macros, you hear that a lot these days, right? Counting your macros, tracking your macros, everybody talks about it. It is truly the most effective way to get to a certain goal from a weight perspective. There's tons of programs out there, so happy to point you to one if that's something that you're interested. It works. What I don't like about some of those programs is they don't focus on what makes up those carbohydrates and the proteins and the fats. They basically say, as long as you fit within, these goals, you're going to be fine. And you might, from a weight perspective, you may not from an internal health perspective. So I was really frustrated with some, people I follow that would say, every carb is a good carb, just eat it as long as you stay within a certain percentage. And I disagree. But because I have different goals than just what my body looks like on the outside. So that's a little bit of an aside, but you hear a lot about that. So I want to make sure I explain how that works. So let's look at these more closely because I know you can't see it. So let's look at carbs. Under our carbs, we have your vegetables, your fruit, potatoes, grains, and you can think of oats and whole grains and wheat and whatnot, and your sugars. So this isn't a complete list, but you get the general gist. And I want to make sure you know some of the very basic food groups and where they fall. And I'm going to turn this light off real quick so you can see it better. There we go. So proteins, obviously you have your meats, your poultry, fish, eggs, legumes. Those are your kind of the main categories of the meats that are the proteins that we eat. And then when you think of fats, you think of oils, nuts, seeds, your avocados, olives, things like that. And it's really important to know the difference. I too often hear people talk about, hey, that a handful of almonds or cashews or something is a healthy protein snack. It does have protein in it, but it's considered a fat. So it's real easy to misunderstand one of these, and you think you're eating a good source of protein, but you're putting a bunch of fat into your body at the same time. Again, you want to balance it. So again, my goal for you is try to hit all three. So I'm going to give you an example of that. Today, I had to eat a quick lunch. So this takes a little planning, and really it takes, planning around what's in your refrigerator, especially if you have to eat quickly, and you're not planning your meals and you didn't make a meal, then you need to be able to just grab and go, right? So I literally had to eat a quick lunch today, and the first thing I do is I grab my protein. Now this looks kind of gross because it's a half-eaten rotisserie chicken, and that's because I literally eat it directly from the container. We don't always. Sometimes I use all the meat and I make a meal with it, but I buy this pretty much every week for that very reason. When I need a quick protein, this is a great one. And you can eat it cold, warm, whatever, put it into anything, whatever. But anyway, so I pulled out the rotisserie chicken and I said, okay, that's my protein. Now I know I need some vegetables and some green. So I pulled out, I had some cut up red peppers, carrots, cucumbers, and there's some tomatoes in there as well. Like, okay, great. I'm going to snack on those. Like, okay, so I have some carbs and I have my protein and I have some color, which is good. I think it's really important. You got to make sure, basically the statement is you eat the rainbow. If you eat multiple colors of foods, you get more nutrients, antioxidants, all those good things. So think about how colorful your meal is as well. So that I knew I needed a fat, and I grabbed some hummus. Hummus, good fat, chickpeas, but there's fat in that. And I also grabbed some crackers. So I have some nut thins that I eat. That would be a carb then as well, right? So these are my carbs, my veggie carbs. You want to make sure you get veggies in there, not just the starchy carbs. But I have some almond nut thins that I grabbed. So that would be a carb because it's mostly like a rice cracker than it is almond. So I don't consider it a fat. Hummus is my fat, and then I'm like, okay, I need a little bit more color, and I don't know about you guys, but I love beets, and these are called love beets. I love these things. They have a lot of them at stores now, or they're pickled already, or they have some kind of flavor. So this one is white wine and balsamic vinegar. So it's like a pickled beet, and I just eat them right out of here. I'm the only one in my family that eats them, but I love them, and they're so tasty, and beets are so good for you. And again, I just grab and go. So I literally, this is how I ate my lunch. I picked out of every single one of these things, and I knew I had color, and I made sure as I was looking in my fridge that I had one of everything, or at least some of everything. Now, and I stood there and I chewed and I chewed and I chewed it all up, and felt really good about how that would make me feel. I didn't eat too fast. So again, that's not the easiest thing in the world to do. If you don't think ahead and buy the right things. But if you're going to buy buy some vegetables that you really enjoy. Buy some things that you can grab and go. The more easily accessible your food is, the good food, the more you'll eat it. So again, think about color, think about some good fats that you like. If you like olives, have some olives in the fridge ready to go, right? To add to any meal. You can grab 3 or 4 olives, add it to a meal. Boom, there's a good fat, right? If you're having a salad, try to stay away from the heavy dressings and maybe some olive oil and vinegar. Or what I've really gotten into is I love walnut oil. Walnut oil is really good. It's got this sweet kind of flavor to it. I put that in with some vinegar or some seeds, right? Roasted sunflower seeds are good. Pumpkin seeds are good. They all have such great nutrients in them, and they're all different. So if you start to add to your inventory of groceries that you have available to you, then you'll be able to, do a little bit more with that variety. But if you need to know more about what you're eating and the macronutrients, please just Google it. If you Google macronutrient examples, you'll get all kinds of different graphics that could be good to print out. That would give you more examples of types of foods and where it falls. But what I want you to do, so this is your homework, I want you to go into last week's tracker and look at the foods and give it a C, a P, or an F. Some of them are both. Remember, like if you had eggs, it's a P and an F. Then I want you to give it a plus or minus if you think it was, a good food that you should continue to eat, or a minus maybe if it wasn't such a great food. And again, it's okay. This is more for you to evaluate for yourself. Am I on the high end of good or the high end of bad? If we had to do the 80-20 rule, are you mostly good and just a little bit bad? And maybe that's okay. But again, you have to look at then how you feel. And should I make some changes because I don't feel so good? And then I want you to try to make some different choices going into this week. So can you have more of a balance of your macronutrients with your meals? Can you add more pluses to those good nutrient dense foods throughout the week? I want you to still eat foods that you enjoy, right? So I don't want to force anything onto you. We'll get into that later. And again, it's very individual in terms of how you might need to change what you do. So I want you to assess it. I want you to make changes based on what you see and how you feel. And then we will come back to that next week. So reminder of your takeaways fully, right? So you're going to take your apple cider vinegar in the morning, tablespoon of that. You're going to bless your food, and really, right, what that means is take a time, smell it, right? Get ready, get your juices primed to have that meal, and chew your food. Chew it, chew it, chew it. Give your stomach as much surface area as possible of the food that you're eating to do its job. And then you're going to assess and track your macronutrients and a plus or minus, good or bad. All right, so more to come next week. Thank you all. Have a good one.